Hello, and welcome back to the Bad Batch from the 186th. For episode 3, we're very excited to be joined by French ace Nicolas Durand and the 186's own ex-European champion, Ben Lee. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
As usual, our players have chosen their lists from a selection that won one or fewer games at a recent major tournament. Ben, starting with you, talk us through your list and tell us what you think its strengths and weaknesses might be.
Sure. Thanks, Paul. Hey, all. Great to be on the channel. So when I was given the list, the one that really just jumped out to me straight away was the Republic list. In essence, it was a 4-ship list, and I've been flying 4-ship Republic for some time. Had Obi-Wan Kenobi with calibrated laser targeting, CLT for short. It had Wolf in an arc, a blue squadron protector in a torrent that was dedicated, and lastly, it had the big fat hound, Lat, with 7th Fleet gunner and hull upgrade. I would say it was a decent list because each of the 4 ships are individually pretty good. They're either kind of tier 1 or just on the cusp of kind of tier 1 within specific situations. And for me, at least, the hardest thing to get this list to work was trying to fly formation with the different base sizes and the various arc-related requirements. I find that unlike, say, Rebels, Republic are a bit more challenging to get the synergies going because of all the various arc and side arcs and rotational arc issues. One thing I would call out with the list is it's obvious kind of target priority for opponents. I find, having played some of these ships individually, would be things like the arc. I think Wolf has a big fat target painted all over him, because he's really kind of a glass cannon, right? He hits really hard, but it's fairly easy to take down. And the same can be said of the Lats as well, too. But I think overall, pretty good list, and I did have a fun time flying it around.
Cool. And Nicola, going to you. Where Ben's list, I think, actually, out of the Bad Batch list, is pretty solid. I'm much less convinced by yours. Talk us through it and tell us what your initial impressions of it were.
Yep. So also, thank you for having me on. I love the concept of the series, so I'm very happy to be a part of it. So for the list, I was the first to pick, and I thought the best one was the Republic list, actually. But the First Order list called to me because I've been flying a lot of First Order, and this was kind of similar in that you have a jousting block of 4 ships with the shuttle, and you have the TIE Baron that could act as a hammer and do the damage.
So you've got Captain Phasma with Crackshot and Special Forces Gunner, Static with Crackshot, and a Mega Squadron Ace with Deadeye Shot, a First Order Provocateur with nothing on it, and a First Order Courier with Tactical Officer.
So my thought is that everything's about static ability using coordinate on the courier. So I like the concept. I think it's not very competitively good because it's a lot of points for a gimmick. But otherwise, in First Order, most of the ships are pretty efficient at what they do. So there's very little that can go wrong if you take 5 random First Order ships and put them together, in my opinion. I would say here the shuttle is a challenge, but other than that, that was my view of the list.
Yeah, so honestly, off the top of my head, I don't know what Static or Deadeye Shot do. Can you kind of read those abilities out for us or explain them to us?
Yeah, absolutely. So static is while attacking, you can spend a target lock and a focus token to change all your dice to crits. And Deadeye Shot, what this does is if your target is in the bullseye, you can downgrade a crit to a hit, and you have another way of doing that, of doing something. Let me check. So it's basically, it allows you to flip a card if you have the target in the bullseye.
Okay, so if you roll a crit, you can flip it down to a hit to flip one of their pre-existing cards. Is that right?
Yeah, and you can also spend one hit result. So you can give up a hit and flip a card. You have 2 ways of doing that.
Yeah, I remember now sort of people talking about this on the RZ2A wings with kind of Crackshot and Deadeye Shot together or combinations thereof. Cool, interesting. So we see Ben, in fact, I always use this phrase, and I believe it's one that you coined, the sort of magic roundabout of obstacles in the middle there, a kind of one central rock with everything spaced out around it, and both of you setting up in opposite corners. Ben, back to you. What was your kind of plan with the rocks, and what is your kind of thought looking at this list? Obviously, brand new list, got a few funny elements in it. Did you have a sort of strong target priority going in?
Yeah, I think for me, the big target would be the first order courier if I could get to it. Now, the way that Nicolas set up was smart, obviously, to keep it as far away from the engage, because I find that it tends to be, nice bunch of points to shoot at, especially without any sort of passive mods on it, like Agent Terex, for example. But frankly, the rest of the list is so kind of low in points. The rest of the TIE SFs, for example, Static, Omega Squadron Ace, they're not exactly a whole bunch of points. Kind of hovering around the low 30s, kind of 40 mark. That it's kind of shoot what you get, basically, what he puts in front of you, and focus fire things down. I was a little bit more concerned about where we would engage on the map, and as you rightly point out, Paul, I stuck the big rock in the middle and tried to form a bit of a roundabout to make it hard for him to fly his ships in formation through it. I think with my ships, I was a little bit more flexible. As long as I kept my arcs on targets, I could trigger all my abilities.
Yeah, and you alluded to it yourself there. A lot of your abilities trigger off the side arc of your ships. Fire Convergence, which is the inbuilt ship ability of all the lats, reads, while a friendly ship performs a non-turret attack, if the defender is in the lat's turret arc, it can spend one charge to allow the attacker to reroll up to 2 results. It's got 2 charges, and one of them recharges per turn. And you've also got your V19 Blue Squadron there with Dedicated. And Dedicated reads, while another friendly ship which is in your side arc at range 0 to 2 defends, if it is limited, which in your list everything else other than the Blue Squadron is, or if it's also got the Dedicated upgrade equipped, then the ship with Dedicated may gain 1 strain token to allow the defender to reroll one of their blank results.
So all these art requirements meant is that you have to fly them in a loose formation, but something that sticks together and just tries to focus fire things.
And Nicola, from your point of view, Ben said in his kind of opening assessment of the list that he felt like Wolf and Hound may be the obvious first targets, low agility, big basis to aim at. Was that your kind of thought, or do you have a different plan?
So there's 2 ways to look at the list. I think what I want to do first is kill Wolf because he's the firepower of the list. And if I want to score point, I have to target Hound. In any case, with the list I have, the torrent is not interesting. It's only 27, and you can pretty much let him do what he wants. And Obi-Wan, I don't have the tools to catch him properly. So it's either Wolf or Hound, and I would prioritize killing Wolf first if I can.
And I think that's actually a worthwhile point. Trapping and killing Obi-Wan is going to be incredibly difficult in this list. But I think one thing you need to be aware of, Nicola, and I'm sure you are, and we'll see this as the game develops, is you need to not let Obi-Wan have free reign. So is there a plan to maybe just go straight with the ties next turn and kind of make Obi have to think about where he wants to be?
So what I do to deal with flanks and aces usually is I try to set up the rocks in such a way that I have a lane so I can bank in, and then I have options to turn on the ace if he's too aggressive. So what happened in this game is actually different because I was expecting Ben not to give me the fight in the bottom right of the map, and I was expecting him to go straight. Because what would have been better for me would have been to go straight and try to go between the center asteroid and the gas cloud at the bottom. So basically, I wanted to have an engage where I could focus all my ships. And from the first round, I knew that was going to be difficult because we both turned in, and I was going to have to go around that rock formation while he has turrets, and as Ben said, all his ships are more independent than mine. So that game was strategically difficult from the first round. I think.
Yeah, I think I've seen that a couple of times, and I think Paul is very good at this, and it's something he can maybe talk on a bit as well. Where quite often in turn one, I'll have a plan, and I'll have a rock set up to enable that plan, and I'll have a place where I want the fight to be. And on turn one, my opponent turns to a place that I don't expect, and immediately that plan doesn't work. I think Paul is much better at kind of delaying the point at which you have to make those decisions. You want to keep giving yourself options while making your opponent make choices that limit his future options.
Yeah, and this is a really nice example of it because there's one key difference. Both players, as Nicolas described, have tried to duke their opponent by turning down their own board edge rather than the kind of probably more standard opening move of heading straight forward from where you start out. But the key difference is that gas cloud. So Ben here actually is going straight round past it, but had the option to turn through it, not an issue. Whereas Nicola here, two things. One, the shuttle is a turn behind. It's a turn delayed from everything else. So it's sort of already playing catch up. And that small rock and the center rock are both far more difficult for Nicola to deal with than the gas clouds which are in front of Ben. So Ben's got a relatively open area of the board he's playing into. His options are open. Whereas Nicola already, after one turn, gave Ben the information of, okay, well, I can't turn back down the board this turn unless I want to fly my 4 health ships through a rock for no reason. And just gave Ben that easier decision space, which Ben's taken advantage of, and now kind of dragging the engagement into an area he wants it in. Where Nicola, even as you can see here, his next turn, if he wants to go for the bulk of Ben's list, has to negotiate this central rock, whereas Ben's got a nice clean turn into open space. Obviously, the kind of flanker is another issue. I like the hard turn that we've just seen. It doesn't commit Obi-Wan. He can duck in behind Ben's list. He can head back up the board edge if he wants to stay going for the flank, or he can just turn in. All options open to him. And Nicola, as he said, I think given the list build, this is a list that doesn't really have answers for aces. And I think that's maybe something we can talk about as we get further on in the game in terms of the strengths and weaknesses of the list.
I would just want to add. So you said that the shuttle is playing catch up. Well, I would just want to specify my thinking with the shuttle was to give it space actually, because my only path to flexibility with this list is the coordinate. The list pays a lot for the coordinate. That's 44 points for a shuttle that's basically only good at coordinating stuff. So usually when I see lists like that, I want to try to play their pieces like they are intended, or what I perceive is the intention. Like I could play the shuttle just to jam a lane and block and ignore that I can coordinate. But anyway, so basically I'm keeping space intentionally so that I know that I have the option to coordinate a barrel roll if I need to. And at this point, my reasoning is I will need at least 2 turns to catch up with Ben's list, but I can pressure Obi-Wan into not flanking as hard as he could. And that was my thinking going forward.
And I think your point about the expensive coordinator is exactly correct, right? The person who created this list has put a tactical officer on there, so they're very clearly indicating that what they want to be doing is giving one of their ships an additional action every turn. Now, firstly, I'm not very sure that there's a ship in this list that really needs the second action, and certainly not at that cost.
Oh, there is. Static is the one you want to coordinate, so you can have target lock and focus in the same turn, and do the crit that you want.
That's an 80-point trick.
Yeah. I personally don't think it's worth it,
No,
but it's the intention.
Yes, absolutely. But I think in our previous episodes we saw a couple of times, right? The theme of this series so far has been valuable TIE fighters. And in the one where we saw a 29-point TIE fighter that does the same thing as this courier, that felt like incredible value, but 44 points certainly feels expensive for a coordinate each turn.
Yeah.
And especially in first order, if all you want is a coordinate, you could use Muse with Squad Leader. So Muse is a TIE fighter that can clear stress. You put Squad Leader on it, and he can coordinate, and he's only 34 points.
Absolutely, that would be very fitting for this series so far.
Yeah, and I think that's something that sort of having done the overlay, I was going to get to. The coordinator is interesting, and I think you're right, Nicola. It's setting up static, and it's a fun ability. It sounds potentially very powerful, but it's the kind of thing that your kind of efficiency building real top tier players tend to shy away from because it's almost never worth the points. And in this instance, the first order courier not only is expensive for a coordinator, but also is a very awkward size and initiative. You're absolutely right, and I didn't mean to be too critical. For your coordinator to get actions to be able to coordinate, it needs space in front of it. And at I2, there's two ways to achieve that. Either you fly it in front of everything, in which case it's an easy target, the first thing to die, 44 points on a poorly maneuverable ship that Ben can just take off the board whenever he likes. Or you do what you've done, which is delay it for a turn, give it the space to catch up with the list each turn. And you've done that really nicely, but as a result, 44 points of your list is probably not going to do much in the opening engagement, and maybe not for a while. On the positives, you talked about getting into that lane. And at least with yellow and grey, you've given Obi-Wan something to think about. Ben, presumably when planning this turn, you have to take into account the possibility that these ties just go 5 straight and try and catch you in that corner.
Exactly. More astute watchers would have noticed the long delay in planning for that phase. Now, I'm not the world's fastest player, but I was spending a lot of my time thinking about what to do with Obi, because you're right, he could have just 5-forwarded or at least really pressured Obi, which is why you'll see shortly I tried to react to that. I maneuvered Obi to give him the option to still run away if he needed to, or actually still flank, and really make the most of that little skinny mustache rock.
Yeah, and this is a real sort of big example of the fact that you not only have to keep him safe this turn, but you have to give him somewhere to go the turn after. So if these guys go 5 straight, you need to not be taking too many shots this turn, but also have some way of getting out of that corner next turn. So a kind of hard one back up, that might give you the range, and you might think to yourself, the Jedi player, oh well, if I hard one right, turn back up the board edge, I'm going to be taking 1, maybe 2 range 3 shots, that'll be fine. But then what happens the next turn? You're then facing along the board edge. The ties are going to be bearing down. They're going to get those range 2, range 1 shots on you. So kind of an early example of having to think more than the 1 turn ahead. Nicola, on the other hand, you've got the 3 hards on these TIE fighters, so you've sort of got space to come around that central rock, but it's going to make your life a little bit difficult. At this point, are you still sticking to the plan of trying to kind of just scare Obi-Wan off a bit and then try and target Wolf as that first ship?
Yeah, so at this point, I'm moving my ties in such a way that I can free hard to the right if Obi-Wan doesn't take the bait. And if Obi-Wan commits to flanking hard, I can chase him down without the rest of the list being able to basically do anything about it because they're all the way at the other side of the map. So I took a bit of time with the barrel roll on red because I wanted to make sure that the free hard would fit. So I have the option to do that next round. And I think we'll see it in a moment. I will do a barrel roll with Phasma, just in case Obi-Wan gets into a position to 5 straight next turn. I'm expecting 1 hard from Obi-Wan for this round.
And just while that happens as well, talking of planning turns ahead, Ben, you took locks on all of these obstacles early on. Do you want to just talk us through the rationale and thought process for that?
Yeah, I mean, by nature, I'm someone who likes order. And for me, one of my usual kind of routines early on is to check whether the opponent's list is jam. And if it has jam, my default kind of first round action is lock an obstacle, just to prevent me losing a valuable focus token or something else later on. And it turns out, obviously, that the first order courier has jam, which is why I thought, okay, let's just lock some gas clouds.
And I think, again, it's one of those things that's very easy to miss while you're thinking through, turn 0, where your ship's going to be, what kind of engagement you want, and to have that presence of mind to go, I also need to account for the fact that he has jam, and at some point in the future that can become relevant. Is another example of why we've got the two of you on here and why Paul and I are commentating.
Yeah, and that is something that I'm not great at, but there's 2 ways to go about it. You can either be sort of very good at reading your opponent's list, ingesting all that information and making a plan every game. Ben has a number of skills in X-Wing, but that's definitely one of them. He always, if you play Ben, he will take that 5 minutes at the start of the game before you start just to kind of work out the points of everything, make sure he knows the abilities, rather than me barreling in and getting surprised by an ability in the first round. The other way to deal with it is to just do the same thing every time. So the other way to deal with it, if you're not that kind of analytical and you don't want to spend that time, is just lock an obstacle as your first action in every game unless you have something else you really need to do. And that way, it doesn't matter whether your opponent's got jam or not. You've done it. It's there. You're not going to get caught out.
Yeah, I like it. Like pilots to have their pre-flight check. Just run through your mental checklist of things to do. Check for jam, check for the points. I always ask my opponent point split. Then I figure out target priority, and I just try to figure out the tricks in the list. And you're spot on, Paul. Getting into the habit is really useful.
And so, Ben, whilst we see these sort of first couple of turns coming in, I think we're coming towards the opening engagement here, but you said yourself you run Republic lists quite often. In an ideal world, are there bits of this list that you would change? Do you think there are pieces that don't work?
It's an interesting question. So first of all, why Republic? I think I was probably late to Republic game, feeling some sort of ill-informed allegiance to Imperials, previously having had some success with them. And really, if you look at the top performing aces list of late 2.0, it's all been kind of Republic at the fore. Because nothing beats the double reposition Jedi without consequence of stress or anything. So, and to make up for that, I've been trying to fly more Republic of late, and I've really enjoyed it. I have used components of this list. I love Obi-Wan with calibrated laser targeting. I think he's fantastic. Very viable in hyperspace, still viable even in extended format. Careful flying, and I love the Torrents. I think that we've seen some of the other 186ers and some well-known players like Morgan Jedi, obviously Morgan Australian player, who's done fantastically well with kind of 2 Torrents and 2 Jedi. So I think Torrents are very viable. As I said, people tend to ignore them because they're so cheap, but actually they punch above their weight. Where I found I struggled a bit to integrate the rest opponents into my regular Jedi list was I found that number one is I mentioned and Nicolas mentioned it's too much of a glass cannon. I think he hits hard, but people often are able to fire him down. He's quite predictable in the way he moves. So when I did fly him as an arc, I found he died often too quickly for my tastes. The same can be said of the LAT. When I first saw the LAT come out, I loved the ship design. I thought it was a pretty good looking ship, and I was excited to get it on the table. But I think my expectations or my excitement were not kind of met so much by the reality of the ship. I find that again, it's a lot of points. In this specific build of 7th Fleet Gunner, it's 62 points, which really I find is again paints a big red target on it. Because generally with Jedi lists, you want to kill enough points and then allow you to run away for the rest of the game, right? With your Jedi, which are incredibly hard to catch if played right. Whereas I find that if you kill a LAT, you're usually about 60 points up in the lead, and it's quite hard to win that back with the Jedi.
Absolutely. A Jedi list, especially a CLT one, doesn't tend to score a lot of points and kill a lot of things.
Yep.
And looking at this list, it feels like... So I think actually we might have erred here in giving you this list because I don't think I've ever seen anyone get more value out of a CLT Obi-Wan than you have, which is giving me flashbacks to my last in-person game of X-Wing where Ben knocked me out of a tournament. But it feels like your list has kind of 1.5 guns in it. You've got a Wolf in there who's incredibly hard-hitting and accurate, and Obi who can be in the right circumstances, but not a lot else. So kind of going into a game like this, and knowing you as well, I suppose, what's your sort of expectation of what an end game is going to look like? Obviously, you want Obi to be alive, but in terms of ships destroyed, where are you kind of expecting this game to be?
Well, I'm expecting to lose Wolf. I just want to punch as much stuff I can before he dies. I would hope that by the time, if I do lose the LAT, I would have killed at least half of the list, if not more, right? Because Obi is a great endgame ship, and Obi versus anything in that list endgame, he can take it. I would actually say, though, and I think you'll see it shortly, I wasn't incredibly happy about the first engage, which we'll see coming up. I thought I did a misplay on Wolf. I think that was one of my mistakes. Turn before this, I should probably have one banked into the ship's right, so in towards the center rock, expecting the engage to happen around there. Because as you'll see, I've had to barrel him off towards my board edge, which means that when he turns in this round, he'll still be stressed. He won't have a focus token, and he's probably going to be blocked to Kingdom Come the next few rounds. And I personally thought Nicolas, played the first engage really well.
Yeah, absolutely. It feels like, especially that roll in from Red that Nicolas said that obviously spent quite a while thinking about and making sure it was perfect, has brought that engage in maybe just a turn sooner than you were ready for. So Nicolas, actually for you as well, maybe this is a point for you to jump in and tell us your initial thoughts on the engage. Presumably here you've decided that chasing Obi is not the way to kind of go. So you're looking for the guaranteed points on the low agility ships.
Yeah, so basically, as I said earlier, I was expecting one hard from Obi-Wan to get a flank, and he actually banks the other way. So by this point, I'm just letting Ben have the flank because there's no point chasing Obi-Wan when he can just hide behind the cloud, and I will have a lot of trouble catching him. So at this point, the decision is pretty clear. I have to engage the block of Ben's ship, and especially Wolf. There was something I saw before the shuttle moved. It would have maybe been wiser to do a too hard with the shuttle, so that it's pointing towards the fight, and at least I have the gun and I can put it in the way. I actually did the one straight because I wanted to barrel roll Phasma so that she can contribute, because I think Phasma is basically the best part of the list. It's a 3 dice gun that you cannot really attack until you have killed all her friends. So I wanted to bring them back, and I needed to coordinate her for that. And she lands on a rock, which wasn't part of the plan, of course, but but yeah. So I'm pretty happy with the engage here, because I can have pretty much everybody coming onto Wolf. The provocateur is exactly where I want him, because basically this ship just want to do target lock focus train at something and do damage. And I was thinking Ben wasn't in a position to really punish that. So already it's just, at this point, it's just do as much damage as possible on Wolf. Try not to die from Obi-Wan's flank, and then go from there. That was the plan.
No, absolutely. I think you make a lot of good points there in that your two kind of end game pieces, as you said, Phasma is very hard to do significant damage to while she has friends nearby, and the Provocateur is your most maneuverable and potentially hardest hitting ship. And okay, so Phasma's not in exactly the place you were hoping, as we said, but she's not in a huge amount of danger and isn't a very appealing target for most ships. And the Provocateur is in almost no danger at all. And if Wolf wants to turn towards her next turn, is going to have a gas cloud in between. As Ben said, I think actually your engage looks pretty promising.
Yeah, there's a couple of really interesting things to talk about through the engage. We'll talk through the opening shots of the engagement, see how that goes, and then talk in more detail about those final points. So Obi-Wan lining up nicely, good judgment of the bullseye by Ben, taking the target lock on to the Omega Squadron Ace. Good initial roll with hit crit. And not a great defensive roll, spends the focus and takes the 1 crit, but onto shields. So sort of early shield loss there on the Omega Squadron. A lot of ships at I4 in this list. Ben having given the initiative. So we're now down to static shooting. No tricks yet, just the single mod. And chooses to target Wolf, as Nicolas has been describing. Spends the focus here, which I like. Already his squad mate is damaged, so although this kind of feels risky maybe to some people, it's tempting Ben into dividing fire. Feels pretty safe and gets the benefit there. 2 hits going through at the moment. We do have the dedicated coming in. So dedicated, when a ship, either a named ship or a ship with dedicated in your side arc is defending, you can take a strain to allow it to re-roll. That's once per turn. So it does so, rolls into the blank though, and Wolf does indeed take 2 shields. So nice early trade for Nicola. We'll see if it continues. Wolf gets to shoot back here. So 3 dice gun, everything at range 3. Neither of those TIE fighters have focus, and Ben decided to go for the one that is already damaged. A little bit of a pause here, and I think just deciding whether to have an early use of 7th Fleet Gunner. Is that right, Ben?
Yeah, that's right.
Again, sort of going back to that methodical nature, Ben, not missing things despite the fact this is a brand new list. As the 4th dice, a roll that really is highlighting the
Lack of focus.
absolutely, but does have the 2 rerolls for fire convergence, which is enough to get him 3 hits. And another one going through. So early points, half points on the Omega Squadron. It's going to take at least 1 more shot. Not convinced the V19 has got him in arc, but Hound certainly does. Another just range 3. Got a plink shot from this TIE fighter. And another 2 hits. Who needs focuses? Oh, and another 2 blanks. This is good early damage going into Wolf. You said he was a glass cannon. I'm not sure he's normally this fragile, but taken 4 from the 4 dice he has faced so far. But I think at least that is the final shot from Nicola this turn. The V19 not got anything in arc, and we are down to Hound. So Hound has a bow tie firing arc, 2 dice gun, has a focus, and rolls 2 crits. Oh, and 1 evade from static. So a direct would kill, but that is a damage sensor array. Pretty even trade of damage. I think maybe we'll go to the guys in a moment to see how they're feeling after that. But yeah, I think there's a couple of really interesting points to talk in the build-up. Starting with Nicola, you said yourself, I think the positioning of this first order provocateur, who's kind of blending into the orange background of Bespin, but is in a really nice place. I was going to say, Ben, that you were kind of sending Hound round the flank there, presumably hoping to keep his abilities on whilst not really being in the fight. But that provocateur giving you problems. And the other bit from Nicola that I really liked is that we saw it in the last game again, which is sort of putting TIE fighters on rocks, which doesn't sound like a great thing to do. But I think the decision that was made last episode and again here is that is where Phasma needs to be. She needs to be in the center of the board. She needs to be pointing towards the fight. And it almost doesn't matter that the rock is there, because spending time going around that rock is going to be more harmful than potentially taking a damage. Now, it does look like she might clip it again next turn, it's more unfortunate.
You have got the potential to fix that, of course, with the coordinate.
You do indeed. And then Ben, from your point of view, I thought that the nice move was having been scared off for that turn with Obi-Wan, then committing and turning back in. And I think a lot of players maybe would have continued to fly away around the board edge, got behind this gas cloud here. But actually Obi-Wan started off your damage this turn, has resulted in that Mega Squadron Ace only being on 1 hull. So starting with you, Nicola, sort of fairly even traded damage. How are you feeling?
So at this point, I'm very happy to have done 4 damage to Wolf, because this means that if I can get both Static and Phasma on target, I'm pretty sure to kill him. And that will be my plan for the next round. Of course, well, we will see what happens. But at this point, the Omega Ace at 1 health doesn't bother me, because I will just send him forward to block. And he will either be safe, or if he dies, he's drawing a shot of more important ships. So either way, I'm fine. And indeed, Phasma is in a good position to just get coordinated for her barrel roll and basically have a perfect shot on Wolf, whatever he's doing.
So some viewers might be wondering also why I barrel rolled the Torrent, the Blue Squadron Protected, to the left in the previous round to deny him a shot, because I could have just gone, stay where I was and taken a focus to add into the firepower.
Yeah, this viewer is wondering that, actually.
So it was one of the problems with this list is the different initiatives, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And I cottoned on quite early to the fact that not only do I fly in formation, but if I have to turn into a direction in which a lower initiative ship moves first and blocks another one, it gets much harder. So the reason why I barreled the Torrent away to the left was because I knew my 1 bang to the right would not get in the way of Wolf. And furthermore, it also means that both those ships are much less likely to be blocked, given that all his guys move before mine. So I was fully expecting some sort of guns forward, red and yellow tie, just try to block that lane over there, and Wolf just gets smacked by Phasma or something.
Yeah, and that is so clear-headed. I don't think for a moment that I would have thought about that. I'd have turned in, I thought, right, I've got a shot, take a focus, this is fine. But you're absolutely right. The nightmare scenario, and it happens to all of us so often. If you're moving second, that second turn of the engagement, where not only one ship is blocked, but that causes a chain of bumps right back through your list. And then you're just crossing your fingers and hoping for good dice. So yeah, honestly, if you take nothing else away from this game, viewers, I think that kind of clarity of thought and planning for the future is how you become European champion, basically. Ben, so given that the damage trade's not gone massively in your favour, but the positioning looks kind of 50-50 to me if you take away the sort of possibility of those bumps. How do things change from here?
I was probably still sweating. I thought Nicola had definitely the better of the first engage. and I was fully expecting Wolf to get bumped the next round and get smacked silly by some sort of Phasma or a Mega Ace combination. What I did know, though, was I still had Obi-Wan where I wanted him to be, and my plan was just to get him stuck in the next turn, try to get into range 1 of something, and really just hammer it as much as I can. I also was feeling fairly good with where the lat was, because I managed to keep it out of the fight, bank it in, continue to have that lovely wide side arc in play, and just one thing that I did most of this game was I very rarely regenerated the 7th Fleet Gunner ability to mean that the lat could still shoot, because I find that I'd rather have 2 dice with a focus to throw at something than just to give something else 1 extra die.
Yeah, Hound is an interesting ship, isn't he? He's a lot of points, as you said, and he enables lots of other things in the list to shoot effectively, but he himself is very little threat. And so if there are other threats in the list, as you have here with Obi and Wolf both being significantly more threats, he's potentially likely to draw very little fire. So I think it varies matchup by matchup, certainly. In this game, I think that's a very good assessment. There are lots of times with a lat, if I had 7th Fleet Gunner, I'd be regenerating it every turn just to try and maximize Obi's output. I think in this specific instance, that's 100% the right call.
Yeah, I'm not sure 7th Fleet Gunner is worth the points yet on the lat, at least. But I'm happy to be corrected by someone else.
Yeah, I've not yet found a place that I'm really happy with it, because whichever gun you're turning off, it always feels like a missed opportunity, doesn't it?
I think it can be alright if you also run Plo Koon in the Jedi Fighter, so that you can just pull off the disarm. Like if your
Yes.
Plo Koon gets
Yes.
you get disarmed by the regen anyway, and then you run away, you take the other disarm, and then you regen for free. I think
Yep.
in this situation it can be worth it.
That's a great point.
Yeah, certainly the lat in general. We had it on with Cormac and Martin, our squad mates, played a game for us just after it had come out, and the kind of conclusion after that was that it was good but too expensive. And I don't know that I've changed my mind. I think here again it's 62 points for some rerolls. The odd extra dice, it doesn't feel great in terms of efficiency. However, I have certainly watched and played in games since then where my opponent has got an awful lot out of it. And I think it is, as Lloyd said, that thing of kind of being ignored. It's 10 health normally. This guy's got a hull upgrade, so 11. And that feels like an awful lot of health to have to chew through to take the support ship off the board. So yeah, I found myself ignoring it and then being annoyed for the entire game that my opponent's got 3 double mods. So I don't know. Maybe it's okay.
To be fair, in this game specifically, I was very impressed by everything the lad was doing. I think it really helped Ben get very good rolls on the attack dice, and even 7th Fleet Gunner, where without it, it would have been a much more dangerous proposition.
Yeah, so maybe something to revisit now that the points have come down a bit. We see the moves here. Nicola, you've got that all-important block.
Yeah, but I got it wrong. Basically, this is the turn where I do one of the big mistakes of the game. Basically, static doesn't see Wolf, which is terrible because now I cannot kill Wolf. And I wasn't sure if Ben was going to do a blue to remove the stress or just do something like a free bank or turn away. I really didn't know. And I was expecting that the 2 bank would keep Wolf in arc if I blocked him, but it wasn't actually the case. Basically, I couldn't decide between Wolf bumping on red and Wolf going fast. And the result is I did a half of each ID and it all went terrible.
So we see that there, Obi-Wan opening up with a range 1 shot, but not in bullseye. Got 2 hits and a nice natural double evade there from Phasma. Phasma doing a good job, ending the focus. Yet another blank from Wolf and 3 hits going in there. But I suppose actually it might have been better if Phasma hadn't done quite so much damage, because now highlighting that here we see Wolf just out of arc because of that block and not going to be killed. So they're going to consolation prize here for static is a shot into Hound, who does roll an evade. and takes 1 damage. You've got a couple of shots onto the Blue Squadron Protector here, Nicolas, and I wonder whether I'd have taken that shot instead. Although I suppose, having said that, you've also got Focus Fire into Hound. Was it the Provocateur that made you take that shot?
Yeah, absolutely. Provocator's job was to do as much damage to Hound as possible, so hopefully would be able to kill him without needing assistance or before Ben could bring in his ship to help. It's actually a bit tough because I was splitting my shots from the start, but there was really nothing better the Provocator could have done this round. I was pretty sure Hound was staying there, so I jumped on the opportunity to get that 4 dice target lock and focus, which is basically the thing the Provocator is very good at.
So speaking of 4 dice shots, we now move on to Wolf. Was always going to get this shot, even if he died. He's at I4, like the things attacking him, but obviously will now live to take another shot. Initial roll, not great. Hit, focus, and 2 blanks, but has the 2 rerolls here from Fire Convergence. Oh, and that's looking a bit better. Another hit and a crit there. Also, if he wants it, has a further reroll from his own ability. So flips the charge, takes that, but that's a blank. So hit, crit. And static, only rolling 1 evade. So taking a hit and a crit. And that is a fuel leak. And now we are on to the shot of the Omega Squadron. Range 1 into the V19. Maybe the last thing it does this game. Only the 1 crit. Does have a focus and goes ahead and spends. Maybe slightly aggressive, but I suppose unlikely to live through this turn, so wants to do as much damage as possible. Ben also has a focus, which he decides to spend to take no damage on this V19. And then, as Nicolas said, we're now onto the 4 dice Provocateur shot. Now, your Provocateur here has taken strain rather than deplete to keep those dice. And again, I think this is a good decision. Gets him the double mods. Partially gets the benefit, ends up with hit, crit. And another natural evade, though, from Hound. Takes a hit and a crit. And the crit is...
Console Fire.
Console Fire. Thank you. Again, may seem risky. You've got your 4 health, high agility ship, and you're sitting at a range 1 and taking a strain. But I think while you're full health is the time to take those risks, and also maybe not as risky given that there are a lot of other potential targets, and you're kind of tempting Ben to split fire here.
Yeah, that's basically the point. With this ship, I very rarely take the deplete unless I'm running away, because usually there is always a better shot at something else, and if the TIE Baron draws a shot, then that forces the opponent to split fire. So that was the idea behind the strain. In such a position, I would never recommend taking the deplete. It's like what I said about doing half of each plan with static. With the Baron, it's basically either you go all in with offense or you go all in with avoiding the shot in the first place. But you cannot go between. It doesn't work as well if you try to do a bit of both.
Absolutely. And whilst we were talking through that, we saw the Torrent, despite having 2 rerolls, only getting 1 crit, but a then tokenless Omega Squadron, unfortunately taking that and being the first ship to be taken off the board. The First Order Provocateur does indeed take a shield, but only 1 shield from Hound. And we are back into planning. Lloyd, seen 2 turns of engagement now. Nicolas obviously identifying himself that not being able to decide between 2 plans mean that he hasn't killed Wolf this turn. How do you see the game from here?
Actually, I think this is having kind of had Wolf escape a little bit because of the misplay with static. I think now Nicolas is in a bit of a trouble because I don't see a lot of places for static to get to that are either going to get him shots or keep him safe. At which point you kind of have just 2 ships in the fight. The Z shuttle also looks like it's going to be out of the fight for quite a while. I was trying to actually work out during those shots what I would be doing with the Z shuttle here, because anything taking it away from that rock is going to take it out of the fight for a long time. It obviously doesn't have a K-turn or Talon roll. So I think the Z shuttle's almost required to either sort of one bank left and then turn back in next turn, at which point the fight might be past that point again, or just go fast and go through the rock and accept it and try and keep your arc relevant in future turns. So I think actually from this stage, if I was in Nicolas' situation, I'd be working really hard to try and think how I'm going to keep these guns relevant. And I think Phasma is fine, obviously, with the SF dial and the fact that you can rotate the arc. But the other ships look to me like, yeah, they're going to have to really work hard to just engage them relevant.
Yeah, and so unconcerned by the Xi shuttle was I. We talked through its shot through the rock, and unsurprisingly not doing any damage to AB1.
We also forgot it during the game, so
and the other thing we saw there was a slightly late console fire, which did indeed do a damage to Hound. So Hound took a little bit of damage this turn. Yeah, I agree. I think if it was me, I'd be wondering about the sloop from static. I think it puts your arc back in the right direction. Obviously, the downside is on 2 health that you may be facing a rear arc shot from Wolf, who has his charge flipped, so we'll have the extra dice, and maybe that's enough that you cannot perform that move. And I think you're right. I think the Xi shuttle is struggling. Now, obviously, the advantage of the bank is that you can then coordinate. You could give a focus or indeed an evade to static, try and keep him alive. But it puts his gun out of the fight for this turn at least, if not next turn as well. So maybe barreling him straight over that rock in the middle is the better play. Nicola, what were you thinking?
So I had 2 ideas for the next round. Either I do free sloop with Phasma to the right, because the torrent will move, and then I can sloop in behind, and then static would go into round. Or I can 2 sloop with static, and then Phasma does a free hard to the left and rotate. I go with the latter because that way I have 2 shots on Wolf, just in case I don't kill him. And Phasma gets closer to the Xi shuttle that she will need very soon because the Typho are going to die, basically. One is dead and static is going to follow. And then you need to get Phasma in the safety of dealing her mandatory damage to something that doesn't care about taking it. And basically that's another piece of synergy in the list. I also maybe misplayed it a bit. Ideally, you want to keep Phasma near the Xi shuttle because if she gets shot, she would just pass a damage to it, and that makes Phasma a very unappealing target. As it is, right, she's in position to pass damage to static, which is very, very, very bad.
Yeah, we've mentioned Phasma's ability a couple of times just to spell it out to people because I don't think she's a very commonly played piece. She has selfless, so when she defends after the neutralize results step, she has to pass off a hit or a crit to a ship at range 0 to 1. So if she is flying in close proximity to something, she is forced to do a damage to that ship rather than take it herself. And now that can be great. And as Nicola says, if you have Phasma as your big gun and surround it with less important pieces, then having that selfless ability and reducing people's ability to burn her down is great. In this situation, it's potentially very difficult. A 2 health static doesn't want any damage to bounce onto it. So yeah, I completely agree, Nicola. I think getting Phasma back around and over to the Xi shuttle sounds like a very good plan. Ben, from your point of view, what are you thinking about sort of going into this turn?
So one of the benefits of rolling the torrent to the left, again, is a different angle of attack to prevent things like the sloop. And I was praying that my 1 forward with the torrent would block the 2 sloop from static, basically. And I mean, we'll see the outcome shortly as to whether or not it was successful. But that was my main plan: try to get the torrent to try to block that turnaround and just get in the way, and somehow be able to clear that whole mess then with like a 3 forward from Wolf, right? Just to get out and then shoot from his rear arc to trigger his ability. And the lat was just continuing to circle on the edges to provide some fire convergence power.
So we see the Xi deciding to turn away. Makes sense given the plan to fly Phasma towards it. Has the coordinate here either to static or to Phasma and gives static the focus. Good idea, I think, especially if you're going to be sleeping, to try and give her that defensive focus, keep her alive for another turn. Nice position again here from the lat. Does 2 things. It's keeps that arc where you want it for the support. And I was going to say it makes it difficult for the first order provocateur. But well judged by Nick. Knew what Ben was about to do. Nice sleep out of arc of the lat itself, and a nice kind of safe place to be to take the shot by the looks of things.
That was me having a quick change of mind there, rather than being aggressive. Might get shot by Phasma. Go to an evade.
That does just catch the two bank, and not by much. Gotta say, I thought that was going to clear. That looks like that may well be a problem. It kind of depends where Wolf ends up.
It is a very big problem because I really needed static to shoot. I already split my fire in the previous round, and now it's looking like he won't get a shot. I'm not very happy with the bump. I didn't expect it at all. I thought it would clear.
Matters worse. Wolf does just fit over the top. I'm not sure had he bumped whether he would have bumped into the V19 or into static himself, but certainly you don't want him sat there with the range 1 rear arc shot, haven't been able to take the focus. It's got 2 health. Phasma could clear him out the table, but obviously, as we discussed earlier on, not going to do so before Wolf shoots. And then Ben, just trying to get Obi out here.
Yeah, on hindsight, I think a 4 would have been better. Obviously, the beauty of hindsight. But the main thing was he was in a bad place. If he were to bump in any way, shape, or form, he'll probably take some rear arc shots or sloop shots from one of the ties. So I just wanted to get him behind the gas cloud.
Yeah, absolutely. And you lose this game by losing Obi.
Correct.
You're right. If Obi goes down, then you're just in a sort of war of attrition where you're already behind. So yeah, anything you can to keep Obi safe is again a sensible shout.
And we see gas cloud having the desired effect there. 2 dice shot from static. No opportunity to spend the focus, even had he wanted to, and plenty of defense dice here. 2 hits from Phasma's rear gun. Gonna need some paint from Wolf to stay alive. Oh, and gets it. Has the focus as we discussed from not bumping, and is alive on 1. And I don't think there are any other shots coming into him. Man, he is alive for 2 turns now, longer than he should have been.
Yeah, living a charmed life. I was chuckling to myself that the only time I managed to spend my 1 focus I had was on defense.
And that may pay dividends. We've got a range 1 shot here. An interesting target choice here. So you've got the range 1 into either ship, Ben. What do you go for and why?
I decided. I believe I shot into Phasma, just because even if I do push damage through to her, she has to push it off to static anyway. The reason being, just push through some damage if I can hurt Phasma for a bit. And for example, static's out of the scenario for a while. It's stressed. Naked Phasma was too appealing.
Yeah, so rather than potentially waste your big shot firing at a ship that is nearly dead anyway, and as you say, stressed, facing the wrong way, you're going to focus on the more pressing threat. Bad evade dice this turn from Phasma. Does push that 1 hit off onto static, who is now on 1 health, and Phasma herself takes 2.
So basically, that's where playing Phasma is a bit tricky, because that's typically the situation where she's killing your own ships, and you don't want that ever.
Yeah, I was going to say, just as we see this provocateur shot coming in here, chipping, I think, a further damage through onto Hound, but only 1. I was about to say that at least Static's going to live through this round, but of course he isn't necessarily. We've got a range 1 shot again onto Phasma. Should it do a damage, the first damage is going to go to kill Static, and there's nothing Nicola can do about it. And at this point, an ability that I had been describing as sort of potentially strong is looking like a total nightmare this turn. You get 2 hits from the Torrent. I think no rerolls remaining on the lat, so 2 evades could save them both. Very kind, I think, because it's a new list, allowing the extra dice to be added there from 7th Fleet. And indeed, there was a reroll. Sorry, so ending up with hit, crit. Only 1 evade. So taking the crit onto static was going to die anyway. And the hit to take the final shield off Phasma. And wow, without even being shot, has taken 2 damage and died this round. Phasma, in fact, taking another 2. Sorry, slightly confused there by the damage. And this looks problematic.
It is one of those abilities, isn't it? In the same way that like Prince Shizor in the Star Viper. It's the kind of ability where you're keeping a ship alive at the expense of its friendly ships, and it needs to be a real kind of queen piece for that to happen, to slip in a chess analogy. And I don't think Phasma is, and Shizor definitely isn't, and that's why we don't really see either of them, I think. Unless they were so valuable. If you think of sort of a 100-point Guri, for example, neither of these ships is that kind of piece. So, yes, they have an ability to keep them alive longer, but I don't know how much value that ability necessarily gives you.
Well, I would have kind of a different take on that. I think Phasma is currently the best named pilot for the TSF, but she requires the right list to go along. So, ideally, if you have to kill your own ships, which is a bad situation, so you want to have multiple targets in range 1 so that you can choose the one that hurt you the less least. And I think the issue is that I would rather have other TISF or even Epsilon cadets rather than 30 points ties that are going to give up a lot of points and are more important to the list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I think that's nearer to my thoughts as well. I think the ability is good enough to make her worthwhile. I take your point, Lloyd, that she's not a ship to entirely build a list around, but I think in the right list, that ability does have value, and I think she is reasonable for 50 points. But yeah, Nicola, I entirely agree. The thing you want to be passing damage off onto is not a 4 health, 30+ point ship. They either need to be cheap or tanky, and unfortunately, these FO aren't really either. Looking very difficult from this point. We've got the First Order of Provocateur, which is still in decent nick, but probably can't really deal with Obi all on its own. And we've got a bleeding Captain Phasma and a Zai shuttle that's still not really pointed in the right direction. At this point in the game, Nicola, or when you get to this point in any game, how do you go about kind of trying to stay in it? Is it a sort of time to reassess, come up with a new plan?
Well, in this case, you have to think about what you can do with the pieces that remain. And for example, here, I mean, Wolf is on 1, but I have no ability to finish him. I could try with the Provocateur, but basically I'm feeling the Provocateur has to do 1 bank, and then either target lock Wolf. It depends on what Hound is doing. Like if Hound stops, I'm pretty sure that Wolf cannot get away from the Provocateur, so I target lock Wolf. If Hound goes straight, then maybe I take the safe target. Basically at this point it's about scoring points. And I think the Provocateur's mission to try to kill Hound is still a good one for him. And as for Phasma, she has to come around the rock. There's really no other choice, because ideally you want to finish Wolf still. Maybe not this round, but the next one.
Wolf was definitely living a charmed life, that's to say. he should have died a few turns earlier. So I was very pleased to still have him on the board at this point in time.
And again, actually, that goes back to the point we said earlier, Ben, about the Republic lists, is that if Nicola does sort of wear Hound down, which is potentially 2 shots away from happening, and then Wolf dies, that's 100 points plus that he scored. And even from this position, that's still a lot for you to then have to bring back, right?
Much as I rate Obi-Wan, a calibrated laser targeting Obi-Wan, by God, to be able to pull that amount of points back by himself. So it's a difficult ask.
So we get that 1 bank. Unfortunately, just bumps by millimeters into a lat that has stopped.
So that's 3 rounds in a row where I do some kind of misplay. And I mean, at this point, you only get so many chances. I was pretty sure the 1 bank would fit again, but I don't know. I don't know what happened.
I think it's one of those, and we talked about it a few times, that one of those that on the table, your ability, your kind of familiarity with the moves and ability to judge them is just that much better. And that probably doesn't happen. But online, I spent this weekend making very poor judgments very loudly in the chat of the German nationals. And so I feel your pain in terms of just sort of misjudging things on TTS.
Yeah, well, Well, you have the camera. That's like I found that TTS is very. It feels like a real game. With the camera, you can move around, and I've gotten used to it. It has been quite a while since I did so many positioning mistakes with TTS. So I think I told you, Ben, when we played at this point, I was very surprised to bump so much.
Well, it's very kind of you. It gives us something to talk about. And definitely better to do it in a game that, although fun, doesn't have any stakes like this one. Get them out of your system rather than them happening in a tournament. We see nice positioning here, I think, from Phasma. Has got into a position where both arcs are on target. So we got the V19 out the rear, and although through a rock, there's not an awful lot that Wolf can do to get out of this position.
Yeah, I took a while thinking about this just because I thought I put the focus down on Wolf and I thought, oh, okay, I'll just try to keep him safe. But in hindsight, I thought he's going to die. So let's go out for bang. So rather than focus and keep to my lovely track record of not having any offensive dice mods, let's just barrel roll him in, right?
Nice. And again, I think just taking the better shot there, right? Rather than having that range 2 a provocateur that, although one modded might just roll good natural dice, you're going to have that range 1 shot into Phasma and go out with a bang, as you say. And we see that coming here. So going to be a nice range 1 unmodded shot. I don't think you're going to get a bonus dice. I think that was used last round, but certainly still that 3 dice attack is going to worry a ship with only 2 agility. And a nice sloop here from Obi-Wan. See in a moment whether he's got that bullseye lined up, but he is now completely safe, nothing threatening him and nothing going to threaten him for the foreseeable future. And he is going to become a bit of a menace, I would have thought. Doesn't quite have the bullseye this round. So we go into the first shots of the round. Obi-Wan into the first order provocateur. 2 focus, has full force at this point. I think after a bit of umming and ahhing, you decide to spend the 2.
Yeah, it was too tempting not to against unmodified Vocator.
No mods on defense. Gets an evade, but only 1 evade. And takes the second shield. Also half points. Nicolas getting pretty far behind here in the points total at this stage, but now gets to shoot. And talking about going out with a bang, I wonder how much Phasma can get done here. With a bit of luck, you could take both these ships off the table, and then it would be interesting, I think, for the final few turns of the game. Ooh, but not really going to do it like that. 1 crit, gets the evade, but Phasma does have crack shot, so that's going to be a crack shot spend, and that is enough to kill Wolf. And then we're on to the rear arc shot. Still has the focus. This Blue Squadron Protector yet to take damage, but only has 5 health and is about to take 6 dice. Oh, and Phasma. Wow, 1 hit again. That is terrible. No evades, so at least does do A damage. But Nicolas, you had to be hoping for more there.
Yep. Well, I was desperate. At this point, you just shoot everything and try to score points.
I actually really liked the barrel roll back in just to open up both arcs. I thought that was very nicely judged. Like Phasma is on her way out, right? And so getting value out of her is the thing to do. And what you've done is the Wolf, which is probably slightly late at this point, but was still something you had to do in order to bring yourself back into this game.
So Ben, although he didn't have the rear arc bonus, did have 7th Fleet Gunner, re-rolls for 4 hits, and that will be enough to take Phasma off the table. And yeah, it's always the way, isn't it? It's the hope that kills you. You know, you have that 1 ship and you're like, right, I'm not necessarily out of this. If Phasma kills both of these ships and survives on 1, and then, we'll get 1 more shot out of her, it'll be okay. And then, yeah, more often than not, reality hits at that point.
I was lucky though. I think the red dice were kind to me, for sure.
I think the light helps with that as well, right? This list has so much modification in it.
Yeah, it's basically, at this point, I was very impressed with the lad because it spent the game giving rerolls everywhere, even through the bumps. And then even disarmed, the 7th Fleet die was much more impactful than the lad's attack could have been each time.
Yeah, and I think actually Ben's done a really nice job of positioning the lat to get those abilities off and making good decisions about when the 7th Fleet die is going to be useful and when to take that disarm token to recharge it. And we can see here on this turn, the lat disarmed, would not have had a decent shot and had given Wolf that 4th dice, which really guaranteed the kill. Provocateur did manage to chip a couple of damage through onto the blue squadron, but given that it had taken no damage from Phasma's shot, yet to be halved, then the V19 itself takes a couple of shields off the First Order Courier. The First Order Courier, in fact, taking the first shield when Phasma died, and taking the second just now. So yeah, another example of sort of the downside, normally not wanting to pass off damage if you're going to die anyway, but having to do so.
Yeah, I think this game is a perfect demonstration of everything that Phasma can do wrong for you, between killing your own ships and even doing free damage when she dies. I still stand by what I said. I think she's the best named pilot of the TISF because she's the one that doesn't die immediately, basically, but she requires careful planning and a good list, I think.
Yeah, and I think, Nicola, if you and I are right, and that there is some value in Phasma, you've done a really nice job of hiding it for us, so it can be our little secret until we win worlds with it. Okay, and I think, guys, we are coming into the final turn of the game here. It's been a thinky game, not too many turns, but lots for us to talk about. And as you say, some really nice examples of the sort of ships involved. At this point, Ben, the game is won. Why don't you sort of give us a summary of sort of how you feel about the list? You've talked about sort of not playing Wolf yourself in the past and thinking the lat's too expensive. Has this changed your mind at all?
Like I said, I think all 4 ships have utility, right kind of build, but I think putting Wolf, Torrent, and Hound together probably not something that I feel fits my playstyle. I think whoever created the list was definitely on to something. I think each of them have utility, and as hopefully was demonstrated in this game, I think they all played their part. But I'm a firm believer of playing X-Wing, that know your strengths and play what you're good at and what you like. I mean, I can name countless examples of people who take unique lists and they might not necessarily be top tier, but actually because it fits their play style, they're very good at it. They do very well. By nature, I'm an aces kind of thinky player, as you say, and as such, I think that probably Obi and the Torrents would probably be much more fitting my style. Let's say of getting some blocks in the Torrents, but playing Jedi and flying around and annoying.
And talking about the Torrent, when I've played you before, you've gone for that cheap I2 Torrent with nothing on it. Dedicated's done a little bit for you this game. Is that something you consider sort of bumping up to the Blue Squadron for, or does it just make it that little bit more expensive than you want it to be?
No, I think you're spot on. I used to take the I2 Gold Squadron Torrents, but I've actually recently swapped to the I3 Dedicated, the Blue Squadrons, because and I tend to fly a pair of them, for example, to play off each other's side arcs. Because you're right, I think Dedicated has a lot of utility, especially when combined with things like maybe the latest ETA Actus that the Jedi fly, because by nature they roll a lot of green dice, but they have a tendency to blank out. So a massive fan, big fan of the Dedicated Torrents. I think good shout.
Nice. So we see the final turns of the game here. A Zai shuttle coming round, may even get a shot this turn to make its presence felt. Unfortunately, one final bump there from the First Order Provocateur.
Yeah, somehow I thought the Torrent would move before me. My head was somewhere else.
Well, I think at this point, I can totally forgive you for not sort of concentrating 100% and flying into ships that I think are moving before me is a particular trick of mine. So I certainly I cannot criticize you there either. I did that just this weekend.
So just a few questions and thoughts, Ben, as we do these final dice rolls. What are your thoughts on the new V-Wing? Because it has the extra agility, it does lose a health. Does that interest you, or is it just those few points too much more? So the Blue Torrent is 27 points, whereas the Shadow Squadron V-Wing with Dedicated is 30. Is that 3 extra points worth it for the extra agility for you?
It's fascinating you mentioned that, because after this game, Nicola and I had a good chat, and he was suggesting exactly the same thing. He said, have you considered the V-Wings? Because they seem to give a lot of the mobility, a more open dial, extra agility makes it more palatable. A really good chat about it, and I've come around to that idea of at least trying it and testing it. The only reason why I've kind of not tried it yet was I like a bigger bid list of like 2 aces and 2 torrents. So the V-wings are just a bit more expensive to push the bid into the 192, 93 area as compared to sub 190.
And then I think the final question, which I think you might have sort of already alluded to, but it felt like you got a lot of value out of 7th Fleet Gunner in this matchup. Now, it's not quite your style of upgrade and ship, but has this game changed your opinion on it at all?
It has a bit. I think it still lacks a good cheap carrier. That I think the lat with the 7th Fleet is just that tiny bit too expensive to make it difficult to play. Like good players will focus fire it down, and then you're down 60 odd points.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of been my feeling of it as well. Like you can put it on a Y-wing and it's incredibly cheap, but it still ends up being 40-something points that never fires.
Nicola, just watching as the sort of final insult there, the provocateur letting you down and taking those final 2 damage to be taken off the board in that last round. A tricky game, and I think going into it, probably a mistake on our part to have that Republic list as one of our Bad Batch lists. I think it's a bit too good, and I think you're certainly fighting an uphill battle from the word go there. We talked a lot about Phasma. Overall, what was your kind of impression of the list, of the game, and anything that sort of you're going to take away from this and maybe kind of look at in list builds in the future?
Yeah, so basically, there are 2 problems that I see with the list that don't feel right to me. The first one is static requires way too much setup, and even after you did everything to give him the target lock and the focus, you have to not need the focus on defense, and you have to not die, and the opponent has to not evade your crit. So that's a lot of efforts for something that looks cool. You do all crits, but that's actually not that good. And I think for the same cost at Initiative 4 as well, Scorch is a better bet. That's the ship that can roll 1 more die for a stress token. So there's this static gimmick that I'm not a big fan of. Well, I'm a fan of it on paper, but in actual practice, it's not worth the effort. And the other thing is the shuttle. So the Xi shuttle, actually, I tried something similar the first time when it came out. I played it on Gold Squadron Flag Club, so the game is still out there. And I had a list with a Xi, Holo, and a few TIE SFs. And basically, I realized that I'm not a shuttle person, if I can put it that way. I think for First Order, you want your list to be efficient and simple, and you want them to be able to move around the board very fast so that you can set up kill boxes and basically play the fundamentals, but play them very well. And so I think instead of a shuttle, I would just take another tie and maybe use the points to bump the provocateur to Holo, maybe use generics. I mean, First Order is a very interesting faction to me because it doesn't have that many tricks, but it has a lot of very good, efficient pieces that you can basically mix together and get something very good out of it.
To prove the point, Nicola and I played a rematch after this game, just as a social, casual game midweek. And he literally took what he just recommended here. I think he took Holo and generic ties and FSFs, and he hammered my Jedi list. I think he flew it perfectly, and the sheer efficiency of having the front back arcs was a beauty to watch. Well flown.
Thank you very much. Well, I was happy to be able to play you again because I really enjoyed the game despite all the mistakes I did and the way it went. And so I was very happy to be able to play again against you. So thank you very much for that game.
Well, that's really nice to hear. And the reason that we've got these guys on is, we're not joking. We think they are world-class players. And actually, Nicola, there are players who, having had a less than perfect game, I think would have gone back on wanting to come on. So I appreciate you kind of fronting up and coming on, despite having not played as well as we know you can. But also, that's how you react, right? That's how the top players react: is to take it on the chin, look at the list, make the improvements, and come back the next turn and win. And I think that does not surprise me at all to hear that that's what's happened. Going back to the list in general, I think that you made some really good points, and I think it's something that is becoming a theme of these Bad Batch episodes, which is that this list has spent an awful lot of points on synergy that, in best case scenario, has a sort of relatively small upside, and definitely the change of, rather than taking Static, he requires an entire extra ship to make him work, and then when he works, it's not actually all that good. Taking those points and putting in the ship that just gets to roll 3 dice turn after turn is definitely the way to go. Good to put these things on the table. Definitely, I encourage everybody to try these things out in practice games, because without doing that, you never find the killer lists. But I think in this case, Static is not there yet, and I think probably never will be. Lloyd, I'll leave it to you to sort of round up, and then I think that's us.
I think most of you said basically all the key points. By my count, Static is the 5th best named FO. So I think there were 4 better choices. So that can be maybe a little fun quiz for people to at home is work out which the better 4 are. He's also the most expensive of those 5.
Yeah, I didn't realise we were doing quizzes, but there you are. Extra entertainment for you, even after you finished watching. I think on that, we'll say thank you ever so much to Nicola and to Ben for coming on. Excellent game, really fun to chat to you, some excellent insight. Thanks to Lloyd, and thanks to everybody for watching. We'll see you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you all.
Thank you for having me.